fountain to look into the water rates and the fees that are charged to the Westwood Village Condo Association. Tonight, as you can tell, we do not have someone actually writing the minutes, but we do have a tape recorder. I would ask that everybody speaks clearly, speaks loudly, and before you speak, if either myself or if you could, if I forget to state your name. That'll be easier when the minutes are transcribed from the tape to make sure that we got it correctly. The other member of the committee is Councilman Jim Johnson, and Councilman Perkins was unable to make it this evening. We also have David Day from the Water Department, Public Utilities, Antonio Idarola from Public Utilities. We have Attorney Les Pinter, Corporation Counsel. We have Dan Garrick, Interim Finance Director. We also have Councilwoman Diggs from the 7th Ward, which the Westwood Village resides in. And Councilman Teicholz would also like to be here. She's also the 7th Ward councilperson, but she was unable to make it tonight. We also have the somewhat petitioners. We have Mr. Mellon from Mellon Associates. He's the managing agent for Westwood Village, and Mr. Bob Pedersen, who's the chairman of the Water Committee of Westwood Village. This is our second meeting that's been continued, and at the first meeting, we asked Corporation Counsel and the Public Utilities Department to come up with solutions, or perhaps to come up with solutions. So I'm going to start with Mr. Idarola, if he can give us a brief description of what you've come up with.
Sure. We were given a charge by this committee and the mayor, and it was very well focused. The focus was to evaluate the condominium's request for some, if you will, compensation or some type of an averaging, which was proposed on a per unit basis, and try to develop a format which would make this condominium complex bill the same way we would bill all of our other condominium complex. If you recall, what's unique about this Westwood Village condominium complex is that they have a compound 4-inch meter. So based on that meter side, it puts them into, triggers certain trigger points within our flow rate, which would make them pay a little more than if we had individual meters at each one of their buildings. So David, I'll let him expand on his analysis and eventually what he is recommending to the mayor and to this committee, which we feel really brings them into compliance, if you will, or charges them the same way all our other condominium buildings are being charged right now. And I think what he will eventually propose and present to you is what gets us there. It gets us into a scenario where if this committee accepts our proposal, Westwood Village would really be charged and billed in the same format as every other condominium complex in the city of Danbury. So I'll let David take over from there.
It's Dave Day, Superintendent of Public Utilities. We did review Mr. Pedersen's request, and he wanted us to average the flow based on the total number of units, where I believe it's 294. And we did look at that, but we felt that would require a whole new rate structure review of everything we do, and we wanted to keep it more in line with how we treat all other condominiums at this time. And I know Bob Pedersen did bring up the example of the North Ridge condominiums, which I understand have 1 meter per unit. And I understand those condominiums were built in the early 80s, and from our research, the developer decided to pay it out of his own pocket to have meters installed at each unit. And then subsequent to that, the city went ahead with their meter project in the early 80s to meter the whole city. And at that time, the decision was made to install 1 water service and 1 meter per building. So as a compromise, we feel allowing an averaging scenario is acceptable, but provided it's on a per building basis and not a per unit basis. By doing it on a per building basis, we bring Westwood Village in line with any other condominium, and we do so without having them actually have to do the construction that the other condominiums have done. We're actually set up on a one service, 1 meter per building. And we do note that this would be a special exception, because we don't recommend or advocate that the use of averaging become a standard tool for billing practices. We always like to use actual meter flow. So that's in essence what we came up with, and which was detailed in my letter of January 23rd, 2007.
Thank you, Mr. Day.
Can I'd just like to have David take that just one step further. And David, can you just explain how that would work and what some of the savings would be for that type of an averaging?
Well, with this averaging scenario, based on the flows, what we did is we took the total flows based on the existing 1 meter you have out there, and we divided it by the number of buildings, which I believe there's 34 buildings. And with that, we said based on that average flow per building, we would typically size that for a 1-inch water meter. And then we calculated your fees based on that, and we came up with a savings for the Westwood Village of approximately $833 per quarter, or an estimated yearly savings of $3,200 per year. And that was based on, I think the last bill at the time, the most recent bill we used.
September 2006.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so am I to understand that this condominium is unique in the city in that they only have one water main going in for the entire 294 units, as opposed to the many or most of the other condominiums that are metered per building or individual unit?
That is correct. What they have is they have a compound meter, which is comprised of a 4-inch meter for high flows, and I believe it's a 1.5-inch meter for low flows. 1-inch meter for low flows.
And because they have this one large water main going into their facility, they're charged more on a commercial rate, more like a commercial rate than they would be.
They're not charged the commercial rate. They have the residential rate, which is the 2 tiers. You get charged everything. With theirs, the rates include the first 15,000 gallons, and then over 15,000 gallons, I think we're up around $323 per 1,000 gallons. The commercial rates have tiers where if you go over 30,000, it's a different fee, and then if you go over the 75,000 gallons, it's another fee. Westwood Condominiums is treated like a typical homeowner. They have the rates.
Okay, I'm going to ask Attorney Pinter if he has anything to add.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Just to restate something the committee had said the last time it met in September, a couple of concerns regarding what was presented last time was whether some kind of an adjustment to the rate structure would result in an inequity either between or among other condominium complexes or other residential housing. And, we looked at that, and there would be a problem were 2 things. Given the, if you will, the agreement for this condominium complex when first constructed to water it this way or meter it this way, and then changing it later on would result in some shifting of costs. If this were adjusted in the manner that the petitioners wanted, there would be some shifting. So in essence, whether it be pennies or dollars, there'd be some adjustment from other people to this unit, to this condominium complex. The other issue that was in the committee's mind that we were asked to look at is whether an adjustment for this condominium complex would match the adjustment that they sought would be consistent with what other condominium complexes are being, the way they're being metered. And as Dave and Antonio just explained, this proposal is closer to consistency and uniformity than the approach that would result in a per unit metering, because that would bring it closer to residential, however farther away from condominiums. And since this is a condominium complex, the equity would be closer, uniformity would be more consistent with other condominiums. So the proposal that's being made, whether the committee considers and adopts it or not, from the standpoint of what the committee was concerned about last time, what they asked about, would result in not only less cost shifting, but more consistency. So in both of those respects, the proposal seems to satisfy those concerns that the committee had.
Thank you, Attorney Pinto. Any questions from committee members? Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, I think too, maybe Antonio through chair. This is the only complex left, right?
That is correct.
Any other issues that we need?
This is the only complex where we have one meter going into the entire condominium complex with no sub-metering.
This is the only one I'm aware of.
Yeah.
I don't,
Yeah.
So that we shouldn't, a month down the road, 2 months down the road, have to go through this.
As far as we know, this is the only complex that is metered this way.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. And the ordinances now state that the units need to be metered individually. Is that correct?
well, no, it's one service and 1 meter per building.
Per
Per
building.
building.
Not-
Okay.
it's
Still
a
very
separate
different than
structure.
Still very different than this condominium association that has the one.
Mhm.
Any questions from anybody else? Councilwoman Diggs?
Yes, I do have a question through the chair. A question, Dave. You mentioned that the savings would be $3,200 per year. Is that $3,200 per building?
No,
Is that
no, that's the overall
That's the
savings per
overall
year on the
savings.
Westwood condominium complex.
Mr. Johnson, another question?
Yeah, maybe to Attorney Pinto. Do we have to do anything with the ordinance specifically?
I don't believe you do, not based on my understanding of what's being proposed. And Dave and Antonio can correct me, but I think it's a matter of public utilities process.
So this is more of a process change,
Billing process.
billing process change. Okay. Mr. Pedersen or Mr. Mellon? Who would like to go first?
I guess
Okay.
Mr. Day. In our September 25th meeting, I pointed out to you and to the committee that Westwood Village unit owners are paying, on the average, 55% more for water than single-family homeowners, and that this was not only unfair, but discriminatory. We were wondering why, in your January 23rd report, you did not comment on this very important fact.
If I could.
Sure. Mr. Ederola?
I think what concerns us is that there's some kind of a misconception that you're comparing yourself to individual single-family homes, which you are not. You should really be comparing yourself to other condominium complexes.
I disagree.
But you are a condominium complex.
That's correct. And even further in my questions, that would become apparent if I may continue. Mr. Day, what would you estimate a Westwood Village condominium unit owner's annual savings to be, using your recommended average flow per building? What would a typical unit savings, an owner's savings be?
Mr. Pedersen, I don't know if he has that information with him. I don't know if he's prepared to make these calculations, but I do know that he has an overall savings that he presented, which was about $3,200. So we could figure it out. Divided by the 294. I don't happen to have a calculator.
And that comes to about $10.88, or 3 cents per day. You know what the annual savings would be if you used an averaging flow per unit? It would be $99. 9 times your recommended savings. Savings to Westwood Village using average flow per unit would be around $28,000. Savings of $3,200 using average flow per building. $28,000 versus $3,200. That's quite a difference.
Mr. Pedersen?
Yes.
I'd like to ask a question to either Mr. Day or Mr. Iadarola. Is, according to our ordinances, is Westwood Village being billed properly at the moment?
According to the rate structure that we have in the single meter, yes. What we're proposing is actually an exception, a special exception, that obviously this ad hoc committee and full common council would have to authorize us to alter that billing, standard billing cycle. And that's the reason why it's going through an ad hoc committee.
So the mayor must have gotten numerous letters, as I know some 7th Ward Council people also did, that exactly what Mr. Pedersen is saying. They thought they were being treated unfairly because they're paying higher rates. However, with research, I mean, people must move in and out of Westwood Village frequently. They would know that this is standard practice and according to our ordinances, just like anyone else is charged in the city. However, you have a unique situation, which is why you're charged more. Is that correct, Mr. Pedersen?
I'm not quite sure I followed your logic. If a person moves into Westwood Village, I would think the last thing that they look into is how the water rates are computed.
Well, I would hope that when residents move into any home, whether it be Westwood Village or somewhere else in the city, that would be one of the things they look at, which is how much the water rates are, what they pay per quarter or per year.
I would think that if you took a survey of the people that moved into Westwood Village, you wouldn't get a 1% agreement to what you just said.
Okay, I'll let you continue with your question.
All right. Mr. Day, you stated, I'm looking at page 2, paragraph 1.
Yep.
You stated that averaging on a per unit basis instead of metered flow is not consistent with current practice for measurement of condominium, open paren, multiple unit, closed paren flow, and is therefore not recommended for consideration. Question is there any reason why the current practice cannot be changed?
Well, the answer, you have to do a water rate study to see how it would affect everyone, not just the condominium complex.
So it would be possible to change it.
If you did a water rate study, you would look at how it would affect everyone, commercial and home
Change the
owners.
rate structure for the entire city
So it would
is
require
potentially what would happen.
a new ordinance.
New rate structure, new ordinance.
Okay.
I noticed that you have multiple units in parentheses. Why is that?
Well, that was just to emphasize if condominiums, duplexes, everybody would be affected by this.
Well, when I read this, I looked at multiple units. Does that mean that there are some condominiums that are single units?
No, what I meant was, right now it's standard one service, 1 meter per building. Whether it's 1 unit or 2 units, or as in your case, you have 6 units or 10 units.
Might it be a condominium with 1 unit?
Well, we don't know.
All right. In page 2, paragraph 3, you say, we understand the developer paid to have water meters installed on a per unit basis, etc. What is the significance of this?
Well, that was his in the early '80s. That's before the city was totally metered. I just wanted to make the case that at that time the developer made the decision that he wanted 1 meter per unit, and he paid to have all that work done. Now, right now, as a matter of compromise, we said we're willing to average on a per building basis, and we also note that this is being done without having to make you do 1 service and 1 meter per building, which I know we discussed at the last meeting. You said you wouldn't be willing to do. Right. So, and that's where we felt we're kind of coming on middle ground here. We're willing to do an average per building without having you do the actual cost to put in 1 service and 1 meter per building, which other condominiums, have to do.
But you use the word "we understand" that the developer paid. That means to me that you don't know that he paid.
Based on best available information.
So,
that's
it would be just as correct for me to say that the developer did not pay to have it installed.
I
Mr.
could,
Chair.
sure, one moment. I could say that the city didn't pay, which means that the individual unit owners paid if the developer didn't pay.
Well, we don't know that.
Can I make a clarification? My name
Well,
is Rich Mellon.
One moment. I'd like to go to Mr. Adirola.
I really just kind of curious to where this line of questioning is going. We provided a report. We really, I can't even tell you the hours that David and myself, not that it's important, have spent to try to develop a scenario that is fair and equitable, that really puts this condominium complex on level ground with every other condominium complex without them doing the capital investment to actually install the meter for each building. So not only is there a yearly savings of approximately $3,200, but there's a tremendous saving in the capital that you're not doing, which really, if we wanted to be as equal as every other condominium complex, we would require you to actually do. So, I'm having a hard time understanding your picking of the individual language that the Superintendent of Public Utilities has prepared as an assistance to this committee in determining exactly what they should be doing that is not only equitable for you, but for the entire city.
The point of asking the question is for me to better understand the report that was issued. That's the only reason.
Well, can you just focus in on exactly what you don't understand in the report?
Well, as we go along, those are the only two paragraphs that I did not understand. And that was the reason for the question.
Okay,
Let me continue.
let's go to Mr. Mellon.
Go. Mr. Day, and you go into a neighborhood grocery store and you buy a bottle of milk for $1.55. And the next person in line...
Mr. Pedersen, I'm going to have to stop you. I apologize. Just, if you have a question, we're allowing you to ask your questions. We don't need examples. Just ask them your question. Be straightforward with the question.
In order to ask the question, I have to give the basis of the question. In other words, he goes into a store, he buys something for $1.55. The next person in line buys the same item and he pays $1 for it. Would you consider this fair, unfair, and complain to the cashier? Of course you would.
Well, Mr. Pedersen, if you can ask a question, you can't also answer it. Do you have another question, Mr. Pedersen?
Question is, how would you react, Mr. Day, if the cashier replied as follows? Well, the reason that he paid only $1 versus your $1.55 is because he lives in a single-family home, and you live in a condominium unit. However, I can reduce that charge from $1.55 to $1.52. Now, that would save you 3 cents a day, which is exactly the same savings that a Westwood Village condominium owner would realize using your recommended method of averaging flow per building rather than averaging flow per unit.
You done, Mr. Pedersen?
For that question, yes.
Okay. So, I'm to gather that you don't accept the compromise that our superintendent of public utilities has come up with and spent so much time on.
That's correct.
Okay. At the previous meeting, we all came to the conclusion that the only way to be fair, as every other condominium, would be to meter each individual unit. Is that correct?
I'm sorry, would you say that again, please?
What's the most fair way? The most fair way that the city of Danbury could treat your condominium complex.
That they treat us exactly the same as single-family
Right,
homes.
and that would be to meter each individual unit.
or to average out the usage of the
Do we,
village community.
Mr. Iderola, do we average out for anybody else anywhere in the city?
Mr. Chairman, no, we don't. And you can't, this is becoming a little demeaning now. You can't compare yourself on one basis and refuse to compare yourself on another basis. You want to be treated as an individual homeowner, a single-family homeowner. You install an individual meter going into each individual unit, and you'll be treated like every other individual single-family home.
The thing that bothers us is that why should we in condominiums pay more for water than people that live in single-family homes? Are we less equal? We should all pay at the same rate. Everybody should pay the same for the same amount of water.
I agree. However, when your complex was built, that's not the way it was designed, unfortunately.
But that shouldn't.
And that is not the city's fault or every other person that pays for water in the city of Danbury. Because if you want to be treated like you're supposing you want to be treated, it would affect every other water customer in the city of Danbury, every other one, unless we meter each building. And per ordinance, that would be the responsibility of your condo association.
We brought up the idea of having each unit having separate meters, and your predecessor didn't go for it.
Well,
Okay.
let me ask Superintendent Public Utility, is that a possibility?
Well, yeah, in fact, I asked that question to you at the last meeting, if we could have one surface and one meter per building.
No, per unit.
Per unit.
There's a confusion here. Again, my name is Rich Mallon. The confusion here is that we 1 minute talk about building metering, which is a 1-inch meter, and that is what all condominiums, with the exception of 2, have. And then we talk about single-family home owners who have a 5/8-inch meter, which is what would be more appropriate for the property owners that live in condominiums. So you can install a 5/8-inch meter in each of the units at Westwood Village.
Well, right now, we do have some condominium complexes that have done that at their cost. They have one meter which we use for billing purposes for the building, and at their cost, they've decided to sub-meter the units, and that's how they divviate the bill.
Now, my understanding from an original owner at Westwood Village and also original owner at the condominium that does have the meters, he told me that it was done by the city of Danbury. It was not done, quote, paid for by the developer. And he'd be happy to come in and testify to that if you want him to.
We installed the meter, but we don't do all the plumbing
Yep.
to get you to the meter.
Right.
That's correct.
The
Yeah.
plumbing's all there now, so we were told in our meetings with Mr. Buckley that under no circumstances whatever would the city ever consider individual meters for condominiums. Period.
Last time we met, it was, actually you guys had brought up the fact that for us to come in and install a meter to each complex would require tremendous amount of work on your behalf.
On a per building basis, on a per building basis, it would be expensive because the superintendent at the time, Mr. Buckley, said that he would want to have pits dug, the service brought into the pits. At that point, a meter would be put there.
Right, you need a meter pit.
Yeah, and that was, we estimated, and he seemed to agree, maybe $1,000 per pit. Then you have the cost of the meters and so forth. So it was fairly expensive.
I think it was even more than 1,000.
Maybe it was more than 1,000, yeah. But it was very expensive to do that. And he agreed, and we agreed, that it would accomplish nothing for the city and nothing for the association to do that. Could I ask a couple of basic questions?
Go ahead, Mr. Miller.
Did you receive the letter that we sent, or Bob Pedersen sent, on April 28th to the mayor requesting the ordinance change and also a opportunity to have individual condominium units metered?
I have a copy of an April 27, 2006 letter. Is that the letter you're referring to?
April 28th. And the letter basically asked that the mayor present to the Common Council our request to change the ordinance.
Right,
Yeah,
and what,
you, and,
Mr. Mellon, what he did was, he formed this committee,
Mhm.
and this committee was charged to look at it, and that's what we're doing here.
okay, so you did
tonight.
receive that letter.
I have a copy of an April 27, 2006 email.
No, this was a letter. I'll pass this down. This is a copy of the original letter. The reason I'm asking this, Mr. Chairman, was that our original request to the mayor was not to get a special exemption for Westwood Village. What we requested was a change, not in the meter rate structure of the ordinance, but a change that allowed the city to bill individuals at condominiums at an individual 5/8 meter rate.
Would that
All
be
right.
actual installation of the meter? Or
Either through a calculation, much like what you used for
Mhm.
per building basis, or if that wasn't acceptable, that the ordinance be changed to change the quote policy, which is in your memo, and practice of not allowing individual meters in condominiums. Your letter states, and this is a fact, that condominiums are not allowed to have individual meters. That's the policy of the city. And what we're asking is either change the meter installation by using calculations or actually installing meters, allowing them, not doing it automatically, but if a condominium requested it, that they would be given permission. Now, I did hear you say, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the developer wanted individual meters in this one complex and that you were amenable to that, correct? And that could also apply now to Westwood Village.
At Northridge Condominiums, it was my understanding that the developer paid to have 1 meter per unit.
Well,
The paid meter, he paid for
for the meter or paid,
or paid to have it set up for the meter to be installed, which cost we would accept.
One moment, Mr. Johnson.
Northridge is, when you say unit, is that a building unit or per individual condo?
My understanding is Northridge is condominiums, number of units per building, and that each unit has a meter.
A, B, C, D.
Correct.
are you sending an individual bill to each meter?
yes,
I believe the answer to that is yes.
and I have copies of the bill. and I
Okay,
have
hold on,
copies
we
of
can't,
the meter. Okay.
for two reasons, we need to speak through me. One, because we don't have someone here taking minutes, and it'll be more difficult.
I
Plus, those are
apologize.
the rules of the committee.
I apologize.
No problem. Is that the case, Mr. Day, if you know?
I believe it is, but I don't have that information in front of me.
It's normal practice, so if you have a meter, you get a bill.
If it's a city meter and we have an account for that meter, you get a bill for that meter.
Okay. One moment.
I have a copy of the bill, so you can see whenever
To
you're on
Northridge?
bills for Northridge, and I also have a picture of the meters that are there, if you want to look at those.
And I'll hand it over to Mr. Day, if you could gather from the pictures, which just look like meters, and then the bill, if they would be individual, if the two jive. It's impossible to tell that those meters would apply to those bills, obviously.
That's correct. I mean, this shows me a picture of the boxes that we use to hook up to take the reads, but I really can't tell from this picture what it is, but I would assume that if we have an account on the meter, we send an individual bill.
So, Mr. Mellon, if you could state one more time, or for us again, what you're proposing.
Well, the request that we had made was not to change the water rates. The request we had was to allow either one, meters be, 5/8 inch meters be installed in individual condominium units at the request of the condominium. Or, if you didn't want to do that, allow a calculation to be done using the existing meters so that it looked like a billing for a 5/8 inch meter. That would not change, however, the rate structure. It just changes what the person is paying.
Well, Mr. Pedersen or Mr. Mellon, would it be cost effective to you to install meters at each individual unit?
Yes. And our board has said that they'd be willing to work with the unit owners to
I
do
mean, we're
that.
talking tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars, aren't we?
Not really.
No.
Again, we would assume, because it is the the ordinance says, and it's the policy of the city to provide the meters, that we could have the meters installed, and we have talked to a contractor that can install it inside the unit. So that's not, and it's not that costly.
Well, hold on, Mr. Pedersen, so, we don't have condominiums now that are individually metered. They're metered by building, that's correct?
That's correct.
All of them in the city, save for Westwood Village Association. So,
Say-
Northridge.
and Northridge.
North.
And Northridge and Westwood were built around the same time,
Same time.
which was the middle seventies, early
Mid-80s.
mid-eighties.
83 to 85.
This would require a change in ordinance.
I don't know if it would require a change in ordinance.
Okay, I'm gonna stop for a moment. Mr. Johnson, do you have any questions?
Well, I was just gonna ask,
Yeah, the answer to that is that it doesn't. But you'd run into a different problem. That is that you would be altering an accepted system of water charging for condominiums. The Northridge case, as was pointed out, is one case that's different. It's different because there was some arrangement made at that time. But if it's the policy of the Public Utilities Department to meter and to charge condominiums one way, they're entitled to do that pursuant to the ordinance. You don't have to change the ordinance to allow for that. You don't have to change the ordinance to allow the individual unit metering either. The problem with altering this case, my concern would still remain that would others come in with a request like this, and would the council be obliged to deal with one request or a number of requests at a time? They could do that, but the question is whether that makes any sense. But no, you wouldn't have to amend the ordinance to install an individual meter.
So if we were to do what Mr. Pedersen and Mr. Mellon asked, we'd be setting a precedent, and it could steamroll with other condo associations.
It would be
within the
setting an
city.
administrative precedent, right? That's right.
Mr. Idarella, do you have anything to add?
I'm just, my only, what I'm confused with is some previous testimony that was given at our last meeting pertaining to the difficulty and the inability to determine that you were metering every bit of water that was being used for each unit. I think we discussed having an accessible area where you can maintain the meters, where you could view them, make sure they weren't being jumped out, that there was no header that could provide accessibility or assurances that each meter was capturing all the water that was being used. Now you're telling me a contractor, I guess, told you that he could accomplish that task? Provide an accessible area to install a meter that could be viewed?
Mr. Mellon?
I think the confusion here, again, that you're relating to is what happens on an individual building basis versus individual...
Not my
Now, you
confusion.
asked me a question. May I respond, please?
Well, it's not my confusion. I'm being very clear.
I didn't finish my sentence even before you
Okay,
jumped in.
Hold on, Mr. Mellon, continue.
There is a confusion between building and unit. At that meeting, our comment said that if we were to install meters on a per building basis, that we were advised by the superintendent that they would want a pit where the meter could be installed. And we had looked into the cost of doing that. However, meters that are installed in single-family homes, meters that are installed in the one condominium, don't require anything externally to be done other than the box put on the outside and the meter installed inside from the service line to the piping inside the basement. And I did clarify that at the meeting.
Okay,
So-
Mr. Adirondack?
Yeah, so I guess what you're telling me is that you can provide an accessible area for a meter to be installed, which would directly measure the usage for each unit, not each building, each unit within the building.
Certainly, just like you would in any single-family home.
So you can provide an accessible area for our people to enter, monitor the meter if we had to make sure there was nothing deficient with it for each unit.
Just like you would in any single-family
Well,
home.
you don't have the same type of a piping system. You have one pipe coming into a single residential unit or a three-family home.
And there's one pipe going into each unit in the basement.
What I'm most concerned about, and I don't know if Mr. Johnson, the other member of the committee, agrees with me, is setting precedent.
Understand that?
Setting precedent is a big deal. Danbury has many, many condominiums. And this would certainly be common knowledge. You already are talking to other condominium associations. It's not something that I go into lightly, setting precedent in a city, especially that could affect every other ratepayer in the city of Danbury. It's not something that we do lightly and not something that we do easily. The mayor wanted to address your concerns, and that's why you're here. Can I ask if my unwillingness to set precedent, I don't know if, again, if Mr. Johnson agrees, but is the compromise that the superintendent of public utilities came up with unacceptable on all levels?
Yes.
It is.
Look, I'd like to put a cravat to that, Bob. We understand what you said, and we recognize that there are other issues there. And in fact, I'd like to ask a couple of questions specific, possibly of council and possible of Mr. Day, that will help you understand better what those issues are.
I'll let you ask 2 questions.
All right. The first question to attorney, at the last meeting, you stated that all property owners in the city of Danbury, and I'm quoting you now, have a right to have individual meters in their property. Is that a correct statement? No, it's not.
I don't recall that.
Well, I have it taped, and we could play it back for you if you want. But
Well,
that-
was.
let me answer the question then. Do
Chair,
property?
One moment.
Okay.
Mr. Attorney Pinter?
Mr. Chairman, it's not a court of law, and neither I nor my clients should be the subject of cross-examination. I don't mind a question, but if I'm going to be subjected to a tape being played, then I don't think the committee should tolerate that, and I would ask you not to.
Thank you, Mr. Pinter. If you have a question for
Right.
Attorney Pinter, you can ask him the question. And if you want to bring something, show something to the committee, I'd be happy to look at it. So if you have a-
Are property owners in the city of Danbury allowed to have individual meters?
I think they are. I think to the extent that's been stated at this meeting and others, that's my understanding.
The Westwood Village unit owners are property owners. Like all property owners, they are subject to the same rules and regulations as individual single-family homeowners are. They pay, as property owners, real estate taxes, they pay other utility bills. And I think it is fair and reasonable, if I'm a property owner in the city of Danbury, that I'd be allowed to have an individual meter. It is the policy for which there's absolutely no justification for and practice not to allow it.
Okay, Mr. Pedersen?
Yes, I think if I remember from our September 23rd meeting, the term charter came up, that you indicated that you had read the charter and that it said to the effect as Mr. Mellon indicated, that every property owner is entitled to have the usage of water metered individually. I said that badly, but basically that's what it was. And I also recall Attorney Pinter
Okay,
saying
let me ask Attorney Pinter a question. Isn't an association different than a single-family dwelling?
Well, yes, but in the context of these questions, okay, just so we understand this, that to go ahead and parse terminology like that from the charter, from the ordinances, from statements, has little to do with what the practical application of the ordinances and the administration of these water and sewer rates is. What the fact actually is that the charter and the ordinances are intended to construct a fair and equitable apportionment of payment of fees based upon certain standards. Standards are primarily related to the flow and usage, both together. They're less intended to provide a perfect and equal division, okay, as to individually located property owners, because property owners live in different circumstances. There's a different history to this condominium, a different history to North Ridge, there's a different history to some of the other condominiums. The departments try to make as uniform as possible, to make rules as uniform as possible, so that the rate charges can be applied evenly, given the same classifications. And that's the key here. That's what I'm trying to tell the committee, is that what this issue brought to the table was a request by people who felt that they were overpaying to say we are in the same class as a homeowner. And I can tell the committee that attempt is admirable, but it's not required if there are circumstances that are different. And here, the committee understands that there's a history to Westwood that is out there. It's not fully understood by anybody, but there's a reason why this development was developed as it was. There's a reason that all other condominium developments are charged in the way they are, except for this one, which paid for it. Others can certainly pay for it, as I said, but it's not the way you have to do it. Okay, there's a balance and a sense to uniformity, and that's pretty key, in my opinion, based upon the construct of this ordinance.
Thank you, Attorney Pinter. Councilman Johnson?
Through the chair to Mr. Les. So their classification as a condominium, an association comprised of the 200 combined units, they're not the same as a single-family home. They might be taxed as a single family, but they are not classified. Correct?
Not for purposes of water metering. Right. That's right.
Mr. Mellon?
Thank you. My second question, if I may. At the end of the last meeting, you had chartered some of the individuals here to do certain things. There were 3 specific ones. One of them that I thought made a great deal of sense that you asked for of Mr. Day was to take a look at other municipalities that were of comparable size and determine their practices and methodologies when it came to providing water services to condominiums versus single-family homes. I've done a little bit of research here in Fairfield County, and I know for a fact that no other municipality or town in Fairfield County has a setup like you have. Was that provided you, and what other municipalities do in fact have the same practice and
Well, let me ask-
policies yourself?
Let me ask Mr. Day, did we look at other municipalities?
I did look at some other municipalities for the basic rate structure and found that all the municipalities are different in their own respect. I didn't find any 2 of the 8 or so, and I didn't include that in this report that I looked at, that were in fact the same. There's industry standard, you have increasing rates, you have decreasing rates, you have uniform rates. Some have combinations of those. So in effect, no one was the same. Everybody has their own little nuances.
And it would be hard to compare their unique situation to what other municipalities do anyway.
That's correct. Everybody has different trigger values. I mean, there's no apples to apples out there. What I do want to make a point, and I know Bob Pedersen wouldn't be happy with our proposal, but the reasons we looked at it were, I mean, we don't use averaging scenarios, and it's not used by anybody in the industry standard for billing practices. So in order to be consistent and accurate, we always recommend the meter flow. The only, I mean, your proposal was to change our ordinance to use averaging on a per unit basis. And the only reason, we do that on occasion, but it's only for specific instances to resolve a specific billing issue at that time. It isn't a standard, forever to use that. So that's why, and we felt we wanted to bring in line with existing condominiums. So that's what we looked at.
Are there any other comments?
I'm sorry, Bob Pedersen. I guess I just have a problem with if A pays $1 for a gallon of water, citizen of Danbury, and B, citizen of Danbury pays $1.55 for that same gallon of water, there's just something wrong with that picture. It's not right, and it should be corrected.
Well, I certainly understand your concern, and I spent some time with Mayor Bowden back in September going over your concerns and the different letters that he had. And this committee has a very difficult responsibility. And there are 294 condominium association owners that are Mr. Johnson's and my constituents. And we want to be as fair and go through the process as possible to each and every one of them. And you're here to represent them. I'm conflicted because I want to be able to help you. And I'm also conflicted because I don't want to start something that we shouldn't have started here in this committee. And as you may or may not know, Mr. Pedersen, Mr. Mellon, whatever we decide here still needs to go to the Common Council, and then it's ultimately up for debate and a vote there. What I don't want to do, and would be bad practice for the Common Council and myself and this committee, in my opinion, is to do something different just for you. However, that is what Public Utilities has recommended. What's good about what they've recommended is that it doesn't really affect, does this have any, Mr. Garrett will let you talk for a moment. Would the recommendation by Mr. Day and Mr. Adirola affect the rest of our rate users in the city of Danbury?
No, this would have a very, very small effect on the overall water fund. As they mentioned, it's $3,200 a year. Although it is a loss to the water funds, very minimal.
Mr. Johnson, do you have anything to add?
I have to concur with what you said. I don't think it's the purview of this committee to set precedent. It would be if we were to allow, at this point in time, every condo association and any six-family owner would be petitioning for individual meters. I think we've made a compromise, which is a step in the right direction, and maybe down the road it can be looked at for an ordinance change later on. I think we've kind of helped them out in one sense. And, it's not a big hit to the city for $3,200, but we are taking a look at that.
Let me, thank you, Mr. Johnson. Let me ask Mr. Iderola, do you have any, you see the hard predicament that this committee is in. I mean, there are unique circumstances, Attorney Pinter has pointed out, and they're the only one in this circumstance in the city. And you've come up with what you thought was a good resolution. Mr. Mellon and Mr. Pedersen disagree, but is there anything they added tonight that would change your mind in any direction to perhaps look at it further, or do you think this is the best compromise that can be had?
We did struggle with this issue. We looked at, with our attorney, what could be done, and in the end, we thought this was the least, might be the least favorable for them, since it didn't give them the large savings that they were hoping to generate by doing a per unit averaging. But for us, it was critical. We not only have Westwood Village as users, we have the entire city population as users, and we have to look after their interest as much as we have to look after being fair to Westwood Village, and bringing Westwood Village to the same level, to the same billings as the other condominium complex, we thought was, and doing that without any capital investment, we thought was really a very fair proposal. Maybe in the last, in their original billing cycle, maybe a couple of years ago, Westwood Village should have approached the city. The fact of the matter is they're here now, and we understand what they're telling us. And we're creating a brand new, if you will, billing scenario here, but we are really reluctant to get into creating some precedents where, as Councilman Johnson said, you could potentially have every apartment, one-room, bedroom apartment, coming in to set up a meter, an individual account, and so on and so forth. And if it's what our elected officials eventually want to do, I think what you're looking at is doing a comprehensive study of the entire rate structure and metering of the entire city. It could take a year to run the financial scenarios and look at what the capital expenditures are going to be, look at how much David's personnel staffing has to increase to take on the additional billing. We can go there, but it's really a direction that I think the full Common Council needs to kind of move forward. We were here to try to create something that was fair to Westwood Village, that would make them as equal as to every other condominium complex, and that's really what we did here. And I unless we're looking at changing the entire complexity of the rate structures, the trigger points, how we charge, who we charge, I think this is the least complicated and the fairest approach that we can put on the table.
Thank you. Attorney Pinter, do you have anything to add or any suggestions possibly?
Well, I heard what Mr. Pedersen said about the dollar versus $1.55 shopping cart and everything, and I don't really know the full history of Westwood, but I would say this to that point, that maybe there were some costs that were not incurred at the time of that development that are passed through or have been passed through to those unit owners who purchased them because of the lower cost, given the single, I don't know how big, what's a 4-inch meter? The compound meter. Perhaps those costs over a period of time have been factored in somehow to the cost of those units, whereas if something different had been done, those units may have been more costly. So it's issues like that there's more than one issue to be considered. The history of this is really somewhat uncertain, but that's one issue that might give some comfort to people who say, well, it's so totally different. It may be totally different, but it may be different because of certain circumstances. So residents and this particular condo, not necessarily unequal, even though they're billed in an unequal way. Okay, there may be substantial reasons for that. That's the only thing I wanted to say.
Thank you. That was an excellent point, Attorney Pinter. Mr. Johnson?
Okay, at this time I'd like to make a motion that we accept the report and go along with the proposal. The averaging as laid out in the report.
Thank you, I'll second that. The discussion portion of a motion is reserved for committee members. I think we got most of what we wanted to say out. Mr. Johnson, Attorney Pinter, Director of Public Works, and myself. I would only say that I hope you understand that we've done our best, and we'll take it to the council. And when it comes to the council, you're more than welcome to speak at the council and speak to the other council members. They'll read this report that will be drawn up here, and they'll come to their own conclusions, but you're more than welcome to bring it to the council meeting when it comes to the council meeting. So at this time, I'll take a vote. All in favor of the motion?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? None? Motion carries. Second. Aye. Thank you.